At the graduation, my daughter declared, "Mom did nothing for me, but my stepmom gave me a car. Everything is thanks to her." I just smiled quietly and left. In the morning, her bank account was empty, and the car was repossessed by the bank. My ex-husband kept calling in a panic. Like this video if you've ever been through something like this in your own life. Okay, let's enjoy the story. 10 years flew by like a haze since Laura and Mark officially stopped being a family. Little Zoe was barely 8 back then. The court, deciding who the child would stay with, considered the girl's opinion. Zoe, without much thought, chose her dad. Not because she loved him more than her mom, but because she intuitively felt that in the house with her dad's new wife, there would be more fun and fewer strict rules. Laura didn't object. Her heart was breaking, but she knew the main thing was for her daughter to be happy. She didn't want to traumatize the child with court battles and scandals. Better to keep a trusting relationship even from afar. Laura rented a small but cozy apartment in the city center and threw herself into work. She was an excellent financial consultant, able to see opportunities where others saw only risks. Work helped her not think about the emptiness at home, about how no one waited for her in the evenings. She directed all her strength and energy toward securing a decent future for Zoe. Officially, Zoe lived with her father, but Laura continued to take an active part in her life, though she did it through Mark. Every month, she transferred him a substantial sum for the child's upkeep. The money went toward clothes, entertainment, classes, clubs, and of course, education. Laura paid for tutors in English and math, drawing and dance courses. She dreamed of Zoe having the very best, lacking nothing. In Mark and Nicole's house, his new wife, the atmosphere was one of ostentatious prosperity. Nicole, a young, energetic, and very beautiful woman, tried to please Zoe in every way. She bought her expensive dresses, took her on vacations abroad, threw noisy parties with friends. Zoe basked in luxury and attention. It seemed like she had stepped into a fairy tale. Nicole skillfully created the image of the perfect stepmom. On social media, she posted photos with Zoe, captioning them with touching words about love and care. Everyone around admired their relationship. Only Laura knew what this pretty picture cost. Behind the scenes of this idyll hid cold calculation. Nicole constantly instilled in Zoe that all these blessings came thanks to her dad and her. "Nicole, we're the ones who gave you all this, sweetie," she said in a sugary voice. "We try so hard, so you don't need anything. And your mom, she's long forgotten about you, disappeared, ungrateful." Zoe listened to these words and believed them. She thought of her mother less and less, growing more attached to Nicole. It seemed to her that Nicole was her real family. Mark indulged his wife in everything. He was glad that Nicole had taken on the care of his daughter, since he was too busy with business. Laura saw how Zoe was drifting away from her. She felt the wall of misunderstanding and alienation growing between them, but she didn't interfere. She was afraid of destroying the fragile peace that had formed in her daughter's life. She continued to pay silently, hoping that someday Zoe would understand how much she loved her. For her coming of age, Zoe wanted her own car. Mark, without much thought, agreed. Laura, learning about it, offered her help. She took out a loan and bought Zoe a new car. A beautiful, stylish SUV. She registered it in her own name to protect her daughter from possible problems. "This is my gift to you, Zoe," Laura said, handing her daughter the keys. "Please be careful on the road." Zoe accepted the gift reservedly. She thanked her mom, but there was no joy in her eyes. She was used to expensive gifts, and the new car didn't impress her much. Nicole, standing nearby, whispered slyly in Zoe's ear, "See, your mom finally remembered you, but it's us with Dad who'll be paying off her loan." Laura tried to maintain contact with her daughter. She called her, texted, invited her over, but Zoe increasingly found excuses not to meet her mother. She wasn't interested in spending time with Laura. It seemed to her that her mom lived in some other world, far from her own interests and hobbies. Laura felt lonely and unwanted. It hurt to see her daughter pulling away, but she didn't give up. She continued to love Zoe no matter what. She believed that someday Zoe would understand how much she meant to her. The graduation evening was approaching. Zoe eagerly awaited that day. She dreamed of a beautiful dress, a lavish banquet, and of course everyone's attention. She wanted to be the queen of the night. Laura was also looking forward to graduation. She wanted to share this important moment in her daughter's life. She bought herself a new dress and reserved a table at the restaurant. She hoped that after graduation, she and Zoe could talk heart to heart and mend their relationship. At the graduation evening, Zoe looked stunning. She wore a luxurious dress that accentuated her beauty and youth. She glowed with happiness and pride. Beside her were her dad and Nicole. They congratulated her on finishing school and wished her all the best in the future. At the graduation, Zoe, full of youthful zeal and self-confidence, took the microphone. The hall fell silent, expecting words of gratitude from the former schoolgirl ready to step into adult life. Laura, sitting in the hall by the school's invitation, tilted her head slightly, anticipating a touching moment. She knew Zoe was nervous and wanted to support her with her gaze. "I want to say a huge thank you first of all to my dad," Zoe began, and Mark, sitting in the front row next to Nicole, beamed with a satisfied smile, "and my beloved Nicole. Without you, I wouldn't have this wonderful car or the confidence to get into the best university in the city." Applause erupted in the hall. Laura, sitting a bit farther back, felt something painfully stab in her chest. She saw how Zoe's eyes shone, directed at Mark and Nicole. In that moment, she felt invisible, erased from her own daughter's life. Zoe's words echoed in Laura's head. "Without you, without you." Laura smiled silently. The smile came out strained, but she tried not to show her pain. She didn't want to make a scene, didn't want to spoil the evening for Zoe. She simply stood up from her seat and quietly left the hall. No one seemed to notice her departure. Everyone was too busy with congratulations and admiration. Outside, she breathed in the fresh air. The evening was warm and pleasant, but a storm raged in Laura's soul. She walked down the street, not watching her path, and tears involuntarily rolled down her cheeks. She felt hurt, pained, and bitter. For 10 years, she had tried to be a good mother, provided Zoe with everything necessary, supported her interests and dreams. And what in the end? She was simply erased from life like an unnecessary thing. At home, Laura first opened her laptop. She logged into her online banking and, without flinching, paused the monthly payment on the car loan registered in her name. Then she revoked the authorization for paying Zoe's tuition at the private university. The payment hadn't gone through yet, and she made it in time. Each button press echoed in Laura's heart like a heavy blow. She understood she was acting harshly, perhaps even cruelly. But she couldn't take it anymore. She no longer wanted to be an ATM for a daughter who didn't appreciate her care and love. That evening, Laura didn't sleep a wink. For the first time in a long while, she felt not like a mother, but just a woman, a grown woman tired of injustice and betrayal. She replayed in her mind all the years spent apart from Zoe, all her efforts to stay connected, and now, in this turning point, she realized it had all been in vain. She remembered how after the divorce, Zoe insisted on living with her dad. Laura hadn't objected, wanting to keep good relations with her daughter. She hoped that in time, Zoe would understand she was always there, always ready to support her. But Nicole, Mark's new wife, skillfully manipulated Zoe, turning her against Laura. She created an illusion of a perfect family where all the benefits came from the dad and stepmom. Laura knew about it but could do nothing. She tried to talk to Zoe, explain that money isn't everything, that love, care, and mutual understanding matter. But Zoe didn't listen. She was blinded by the glitter of luxury and attention. And now, at the graduation evening, Laura saw the result of her efforts. Zoe thanked only those who gave her money and gifts. Not a word about her, the mother. Laura understood she had to change something in her life. She could no longer allow herself to be a victim of circumstances. She had to protect herself and her dignity. And the first step was stopping the financial support for Zoe. The next morning, Zoe got a call from the bank. A cold, impassive voice informed her that her car was under seizure and the repossession process had begun. The girl was stunned. She couldn't believe it was possible. The car, a symbol of her freedom and adult life that she loved so much, was being taken away. In a panic, Zoe dialed her dad's number. "Dad, what's happening?" the bank called, saying they're taking the car. Mark hesitated. "Zoe, honey, it's like this. There were some delays with payments." "We'll sort it out now, don't worry." "What delays? You always said everything was paid." "Well, you see," Mark stammered, feeling the lie cracking his carefully built image of a benefactor. Anyway, I'll talk to the bank now. We'll fix it. The talk with the bank led nowhere. Soon came another unpleasant news. The tuition contract was suspended. Zoe rushed to Nicole in fury. You promised everything would be fine. What about my studies? Nicole, until then invariably friendly and generous, suddenly bristled, her face twisted in a grimace of irritation. I promised nothing. You're an adult now. Solve your own problems. Mark said he'd pay. Ask him. That evening, a real scandal erupted. Nicole, usually restrained in her emotions, screamed at Mark without holding back. Zoe sat in her room, listening to their argument. You promised you'd pay. Now what? Should I pay for her out of my pocket? I have my own things to do. Let your ex handle it. But I hoped Laura would pay. Mark justified himself. She always did. Yeah, dream on. Is she a charity? Do you even realize how much money went on her? No, now you figure it out yourself. Mark, feeling the ground slip away, dialed Laura's number in panic. Usually confident and arrogant, now he spoke almost pleadingly. Laura, hi. Listen, there's this issue. Problems with Zoe. They're taking the car. The university called. Maybe you can help? Silence fell on the line. Mark, I'm surprised you're even calling me, Laura finally said in a calm, even voice. I just crossed myself off the sponsor list. Let those who gave everything handle it now, but Zoe's not guilty of anything. She's your daughter. Your daughter, Mark? And Nicole's too. You gave everything, didn't you? And I, apparently, was just passing by. Laura hung up. Mark stood with the phone in his hand, stunned by her words. He suddenly realized that all these years, he'd lived in an illusion created by himself and Nicole. They had convinced Zoe of their generosity and indispensability while diligently erasing Laura from her life. Now, when it was time to pay the bills, it turned out their generosity was just an appearance, built on maternal love and Laura's unwavering reliability. Zoe, who had overheard her dad's conversation, burst into the living room in rage. What does this mean? Why did Mom refuse to help? Mark lowered his head. She doesn't want to pay anymore. Said it's your turn to figure it out. But how? You promised. Nicole promised. Mark sighed and, avoiding his daughter's gaze, said, Zoe, I have to tell you something. Neither I nor Nicole put a dime into your education or the car. Your mother paid for everything. Zoe froze, as if struck by lightning. What she'd heard didn't fit in her head. Everything she believed crumbled in an instant. The image of a caring dad and generous stepmom faded, leaving only a bitter taste of deceit and betrayal. But why? Why did you lie to me? We wanted you to feel our love and care, Mark muttered, not lifting his eyes. We wanted you to know we're always there. There? Contempt rang in Zoe's voice. You were there when you poisoned my life, turning me against my mom. You were there when you took credit for her efforts. You were there when you deprived me of the chance to know the truth. Zoe ran out of the house, unable to stay near the people she considered her family anymore. She walked down the street, not watching her path, deafened by the truth crashing down on her. For the first time in a long while, she felt truly alone and lost. Everything that seemed unshakable and reliable turned out to be just a house of cards, collapsing at a single touch. Fragments of memories swirled in her head, rare meetings with her mom, her restrained smiles and quiet questions about her life. Back then, it seemed her mom was just buying her off with money, that she didn't care. Now she understood that behind that money stood immense maternal love, which she had so foolishly rejected. She remembered the graduation evening, her words of thanks to her dad and Nicole, and how she deliberately ignored her mom. She recalled her sad smile and quiet exit. Back then, she felt no remorse. Thought she'd done everything right. Now, sharp pain squeezed her heart. She realized how deeply she'd hurt the closest and most loving person. Left without her usual comfort, Zoe faced reality for the first time. Realizing she might be left without an education spurred her to action. She applied to several state universities, and to her surprise, her scores were enough to get into a budget spot at one of them. The faculty wasn't the most prestigious, and the major wasn't what she'd dreamed of, but it was a chance to get higher education for free. Nicole, as soon as it became clear no one would pay for Zoe anymore, distanced herself. Her showy care evaporated like morning fog. No more expensive gifts, joint shopping trips, or compliments. Zoe felt like a burden, an uninteresting toy tossed aside as useless. She saw how Nicole avoided her, citing busyness and poor health. An atmosphere of cold and alienation settled in the house. Mark, on the contrary, tried to get closer to his daughter. He felt guilty for letting Nicole manipulate Zoe for so long and push Laura away. He tried to talk heart to heart with Zoe, explaining that he'd always loved her and wanted the best for her. But Zoe no longer believed his words. For too long, he'd let Nicole influence their relationship. Too often, he'd put her interests above his daughter's. Trust was undermined, and restoring it proved difficult. Zoe responded to his attempts at closeness reservedly and distantly, not letting him into her feelings. She felt betrayed by both parents, by her mom, who suddenly cut off financial support, and by her dad, who hadn't protected her from Nicole's influence. The first months of university were tough for Zoe. She felt out of place among students unused to luxury, who viewed her with suspicion. She had to save on everything to make ends meet. She worked evenings handing out flyers to buy food and clothes. The life she was used to now seemed a distant and unattainable dream. Zoe often thought of Laura. She reflected on how she'd offended her at graduation, how she hadn't appreciated her care and support. She understood she'd lived in an illusion created by Nicole and fueled by her own selfishness all these years. She was ashamed of her behavior and pained by realizing how much she'd wounded her mom. One evening after a hard day, Zoe sat in her room looking at old photos. In one, she was a little girl sitting on Laura's lap. Mom was smiling at her, her eyes shining with love. Zoe felt tears streaming down her cheeks. She realized she could no longer live with this burden of guilt and resentment. She needed to talk to her mom, apologize, and try to fix everything. Gathering her courage, Zoe dialed Laura's number. The rings dragged on endlessly, and with each one, Zoe's hope faded. Finally, Laura answered. Her voice was cold and detached. "Mom, it's me, Zoe," Zoe said in a trembling voice. "Hello, Zoe," Laura replied dryly. In the hanging silence, Zoe felt even more alone and guilty. "Mom, I know I was wrong. I want to apologize. I understand what you did for me all these years, and I didn't appreciate it. I was stupid and selfish. Forgive me, please." Laura was silent. Zoe had already lost hope for forgiveness when she heard a quiet sigh. "I hear you, Zoe. I know it's hard for you now. Mom, I want to fix everything. I want us to be together again, like before. Like before won't happen. Zoe, you've changed, and I've changed, but that doesn't mean we can't build new relationships." "What relationships, Mom? I understand you don't want to support me anymore. I'm not asking for that. I just want you to be there. I've always been there, Zoe. You just didn't notice. I've always loved you and will love you, but now I'll love you as a mom, not as an ATM. I'll support you morally, help with advice, but you must learn to earn your own living and take responsibility for your actions." "I understand, Mom. I'm ready for that." "Good. Then come over tomorrow, we'll talk." Zoe felt a weight lift from her heart. She was happy that Laura agreed to listen and give her a chance. The next day, Zoe went to Laura's. The apartment looked cozy and clean. Laura met her at the door with a restrained smile. "Come in, Zoe. Tea?" "Yes, Mom," Zoe replied, feeling tears welling up again. They sat in the kitchen drinking tea. Laura asked Zoe about her studies, her life in the dorm. Zoe told her everything, hiding nothing. She spoke of her difficulties, her disappointments, her hopes. Laura listened attentively, without interrupting or judging. "I'm proud of you, Zoe," Laura said when Zoe finished her story. "You're a strong and brave girl. You'll manage just fine." "Thank you, Mom," Zoe replied and hugged Laura. Laura hugged her back tightly. In that embrace, Zoe felt the warmth and love she'd missed all these years. She understood that Laura had always been her real mother, loving and caring despite all her mistakes and delusions. "I'm here, Zoe," Laura whispered. But now, as a mom, not as an ATM. Zoe smiled through her tears. She knew this was the start of a new chapter in their relationship. A chapter based on mutual respect, love, and support, a chapter where she'd learn to be independent and responsible, to value what she had, and not forget those who loved her. She was ready for it. She was ready to start from scratch, herself.